You're not surprised by the places we find ourselves this morning or the circumstances we're in. And God, I just ask that in the midst of that, in those places of added stress and pressure, that, Lord, you would come and meet us. And Lord, that even this morning would maybe give us some more tools or some more ways in which to engage with your plan and your hope for our health. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, Amy, welcome. So glad you're with me this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. So I want you to explain a little bit about what it means to be a cognitive psychologist. And because all I hear when you say words like that is that you're really, really smart.
So a cognitive psychologist is a psychologist who specializes in thinking and learning. And so that's what I do. I specialize in neurodevelopmental disorders, ADHD, brain injury, Alzheimer's, and I work predominantly in research, but I do work individually with clients as well. That's what being a cognitive psychologist means.
That's, yeah. Translation, she's very, very smart. Yeah. So, all right, so go ahead.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I'm taking your time. I want you to share. My hope is that this morning you would share with us some of what you're seeing and even maybe the way God designed us and maybe how should we respond in some of these places. So.
Okay. So about a year ago, the Lord started stirring something in my heart that I needed to be doing more than just research, that there were so many people that were hurting and that I needed to help minister to those hurting hearts. So I am a board-certified Christian counselor as well. And so the Lord put it on my heart to join the Pastoral Care team here and then lead the Pastoral Care team here. So that's how we ended up right now.
Yeah. Yeah, so this summer, Amy came with this idea of, hey, there's this really great way we could do training and even train some of our leaders in the church to do pastoral care. And what do you think about this and how can we get some of this rolling? So, yeah.
Absolutely. So what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think when we think about things like mental health, one of the things that I think most people struggle with is they go to one of two extremes, right? They go, oh man, does this mean I'm really jacked up, right? Or am I jacked up and I don't know it, right? In other words, so I think it would be good for you to talk a little bit about where people can be in those places.
Okay. So this was a really difficult year, right? It was full of uncertainty and fear and anxiety, and with the isolation, there was probably a lot of depression happening. If those people who already had some underlying mental health problems, it probably exacerbated that. But even people who didn't have previous struggles with mental health might have begun saying, wow, I'm really struggling, right? And I think there are many people who haven't struggled that much. And so I think it's important to say that it's okay to be okay in this season. If you already worked from home, your professional life probably wasn't turned upside down, right? If you are an introvert, you might have appreciated not having to make small talk all day, every day around the water cooler at work, right? So there are certainly situations where people were okay throughout this. And so not only is it okay that you're okay, that's fantastic because you probably have the capacity to bring joy and strength to those who aren't okay. So I think that was important to give a pass to those.
Sure.
Don't feel guilty about feeling okay.
Sure.
But I think it's also important to say that it's okay not to be okay. That what you might be experiencing is perfectly normal. Uncertainty can wreak havoc on our psyche, right? And sometimes uncertainty is harder than the actual problem.
Right.
So as Christians, too often we feel a stigma or a sense of shame when we're experiencing mental health problems. Like you mentioned, perhaps that's spiritual warfare. Maybe I don't have enough faith. Maybe I just need to pray harder. It's a battle that Christians fight with themselves. And also, they're afraid to share it with their church family.
Yeah.
Right? And the interesting thing is, there are so many examples of depression and anxiety in the Bible, so many examples of godly people who openly express their struggles with depression and anxiety and fear. So let me give you four, just four.
Can I interrupt real quick?
Yeah.
Ask you a quick question. So when we think about a word like, let's say, depression or anxiety, some people have long-term struggles in those
Sure.
areas, but everybody has moments, right, where they are, right? So my father passed away a year ago, and in the midst of him knowing he was going to die and then his passing, I just will tell you, that's as down as I've ever been. Mm-hmm. And it was clear to me I was struggling with depression. So there's seasonal pieces of this, right? I mean, there's hope, right?
Right, absolutely. And so certainly situational depression is very common, especially coupled with grief and loss, just like you're talking about. But then there are also, clinical pathological depressions and anxiety. I have suffered from clinical depression for almost 40 years. So certainly that's another type of struggle, right, that could be exacerbated by situations as well. You kind of get double whammied there, right?
Well, I just felt like it was important to kind of say that there's both and sometimes it comes in waves at different places. And so I'm sorry, keep sharing your examples. I love the idea of having some biblical examples.
Okay, absolutely. So about half of the Psalms actually describe emotional distress. There are 150 Psalms, so more than half of those describe suffering, right? So 150 Psalms, over 30,000 words. It's the third largest book of the Bible, right? So to have that many examples of suffering. So David, for example, Psalm 55, verse 2, hear me and answer me. My thoughts trouble me and I am distraught. David also writes in Psalm 139, search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. So that's one.
Yeah.
Here's another. In 1 Kings, we learn the story of Elijah, who was a mighty prophet. He was super brave. He basically eradicated, over 400 false prophets, challenged the king in a contest of sorts to show who was the one true God, your God or our God, and won. But when Jezebel, the evil queen, these stuff movies are made of, hears this, she threatens to kill him. And in a moment that's completely out of character for this super brave prophet, he panics. He's overwhelmed with fear, and he runs into the wilderness, and he hides, and he says to the Lord, I want to give up. He says in 1 Kings 19, I've had enough, Lord. Take my life. Take my life. We know from Paul's letters over and over again the many times he writes about his despair and his suffering. And so in his second letter to the Corinthians, he says, we were crushed and overwhelmed beyond our ability to endure, and we thought we would never live through it. And he was so open about his suffering, not only when he was praying to the Lord, but when he was writing to full towns of believers, right? He was open about his suffering. And then I think one of the most beautiful depictions in the Bible of sadness is Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. When he thought dying would be better than living, right? So he goes off to the side, he says to Peter, my soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death. And then he says to God, he cries to God, my Father, if it is possible, may this cup be taken from me. So if these stories of godly men and God as man made it into the Lord's book, right? Doesn't it tell us that even the strongest of believers can struggle with mental health? Right? And what happened? What happened in the moments after these passages for all of these men? God showed up, right? He shows up. And he may not have changed their circumstances, but he changed their focus and the way they thought about their circumstances. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
can I interrupt here real quick?
Yeah.
I think what's fascinating for me as we look at the scriptures, and let's just take Jesus for a moment, just Jesus, fully human, fully God. There's different languages at different moments. There's moments where it says Jesus was moved with compassion. There's moments where Jesus wept, right, when Lazarus has passed away, even though he knows he's about to bring Lazarus out of the grave. As Mary and Martha are grieving, he weeps with them. He joins them in that moment. There's other moments where he's moved to anger, right? Now, it's righteous anger. It's one I haven't been able to figure out yet, but it's righteous. There's the emotional piece of the way that he engages. And I think what's beautiful, particularly the way you use Psalms and then coming back to Jesus, is I've been doing this devotional the last few years called the Songs of Jesus. It's basically on the Psalms, because it's clear that for many of that Jesus was really aware of the Psalms, and this tapping into these places of the laments and the places of going, God, this is really hard. And what I love about all four of these examples is they're all four humans that really struggled, but they didn't stay in their struggle and spiral. They actually took it to the Lord. Do you hear that piece? There's a really important point here. They were honest about what they were feeling, and who knows, I don't know. I mean, Elijah's one that I've struggled with is like, dude, you just kicked some serious booty, right? Come on. Like, take a victory lap, and he's running and hiding and panicking and whatever. But in the midst of their distress, they took it to the Lord. So if you hear nothing else we say today, hear this. No matter where you are, God is not surprised. It's okay what you're feeling, but you can't stay there forever. You have to somewhere invite the Lord into it with you. Okay? Sorry.
No, that's great.
All right.
So the fact that they made it into the book, the fact that there are so many examples, and there are dozens and dozens more, right, tells us that it's completely normal for believers to experience this, right? And it also tells us that the church should be the safest place
That's right.
to talk about these struggles.
Yeah, that's right.
The safest place.
Yeah.
And we believe that mental health needs need to be served in the church, that this is not just for secular response. This is for faith-based response. So life is difficult, right? Not even in the middle of a pandemic, but always. Life is difficult. And so as Christians, we have a unique opportunity that non-believers don't have, right? So if you're not a believer and you're struggling, then you have a problem focus. And a problem focus creates fear. But as believers, we can have a promise focus. And a promise focus gives us hope.
So good.
Yeah. So I want to share a quote with you. So Tim Clinton is the president of the American Association of Christian Counselors. And he says, we're very aggressive in our worrying, but passive in managing our stress. Why is that? I mean, it's so easy to let our thoughts tangle up our minds, right, until the enemy starts speaking lies to us and we get wrapped up in all of this. And we can become physically ill from all of the worrying, right? But what if we flipped that script? What if we became aggressive in managing our stress?
So going back to this idea of the pandemic, of what's happened since middle of March in our 2020, is one of the things that I think has been incredibly painful for most people, even introverts, by the way, is this forced isolation. There becomes a point where you go, even as an introvert, okay, I've had 3 months by myself, I could be around people for just 5 minutes, right? Introverts of the world unite, come on. We can be there. And in the midst of that, it's what is forced on our kids, right? For parents who have kids schooling at home and doing all that stuff, it's created all kinds of weird dynamics. And so in the midst of this, in this place, I feel like what ends up happening is all those ways in which we can engage with the world, all the familiar things that maybe held us in place before that were taken away, whether it's we always went out to eat on Sunday after church like I did when we were growing up. Usually it was Wendy's because my mom was named Wendy. That's where my dad would always say every Sunday after church, yeah, we're going to Wendy's. Yay, fries. Nope, home. Yeah, anyhow, thank you very much. So, but I do think the familiar that's been all disrupted have actually revealed some of the places where our foundations were a little bit broken. Doctor? Yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, do you see that showing up for people? Do you see that showing up in the kind of the forced isolation pieces showing up for folks?
Yeah, absolutely.
And where do you think that's showing up? I mean, is there other ways? I'm sorry, you keep talking. I keep interrupting you.
That's okay. Yeah, so the mind and body are intimately connected, right? And so that we are not designed to be alone, right? We're relational beings. And so forced isolation is going to be difficult on everyone, not just the introverts, but the extroverts as well. My youngest son, whom you all know, Evan, Evan is the biggest, boldest extrovert I've ever met. And he is really, really struggling in the midst of this forced isolation, absolutely. But what we see happening is when we're struggling mentally, we're also struggling physically, right? So perhaps you're sleeping more, perhaps you're eating more, perhaps you're not sleeping at all, perhaps you're not eating at all, right? And so it changes our behaviors. It absolutely changes our behaviors.
Well, so what do we do? I mean, you're really smart, so I assume you have some strategies. You want to share some of those with us?
Yes, I'm going to share 3 with you.
Okay, very good.
Okay. So 3 ways that we can aggressively approach the stress that we're feeling right now. The number one thing we need to do is be connected. So connectedness is the number one buffer against mental health crisis. The number one buffer. And so we have to be connected, pandemic or not. We have to find ways to do that, whether it's nurturing the relationships in our own homes, whether it's using technology to connect to family, to friends, to our coworkers, to continue to meet in our small groups, even if it's over Zoom and not in person if you can't. We have to find ways to stay connected and nurture those relationships. I've got an analogy.
Okay.
So when you go on a safari, you're told that the rule is that you stay in the Jeep, right? Because tigers view a Jeep full of people as one entity, right? But you got that one guy who never listens to the rule, right? He's hanging out the side, jumping out, taking his pictures, and what happens? He's attacked. He's lunch, right? And so the enemy works the exact same way. He waits for you to be alone and isolated so that he can speak lies to you. And so it is super important to stay in the Jeep.
Yeah.
Stay in the Jeep, to
So
stay connected.
We've said this many times, many times, but we're going to keep saying it, and maybe at some point it will actually stick. If you have to choose between coming to Sunday service and being in a small group, we would rather you be in a small group. Because real life happens when you're with a smaller group of people where you can get to know one another, you can live life authentically, transparently, and hopefully even vulnerably. And so if you are not in a small group and you need to connect with one, we've got an online one that's kicking off here in the middle of January. And we have other groups that are continuing to meet. For some places, some people, I know that they have to be super cautious and careful. We will create more online opportunities for those that need it. Just please do not stay alone right now or stay isolated. So, all right, number 1. So all right,
number 2, you have to take care of your body. Eat, sleep, move, pray. So I could talk about the science for the next 6 hours on how taking care of your physical health directly impacts your mental health, but I don't have 6 hours. I'm going to tell you one big thing. 95% of serotonin, which is the neurotransmitter, the chemical in our brain that regulates mood, 95% of it is produced in the gut, not in the brain. Right. So you have to eat well. Eat, sleep, move, and pray. That's number 2.
Okay.
Take care of your body. Would you like to commentate?
No. I just found myself thinking I have not been eating very well since Thanksgiving to Christmas.
Yeah.
Yeah. People, stop making me sweets, okay? Go ahead.
Yes, sugar is inflammatory, and we know that it is inflammatory to the body, but our brain is part of our body. So if it's inflaming our body, it's inflaming our brains. Okay, number 3.
Go ahead, you're doing great. I'm trying. I feel like I need to exercise a little bit right now. Go ahead, number 3.
All right, number 3 is change your self-talk. So self-talk is that internal dialogue, that internal conversation that you have with yourself all day, every day, right? This is fun. Man, this is horrible. This is stress. Why does this always happen to me, right? So you're constantly talking to yourself about everything that's happening, right? And so it narrates our beliefs. And if we can change our beliefs, then we can change our feelings and our behaviors. Proverbs 23:7 says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." So you've heard the phrase, you are what you eat? Well, this is you are what you think. So this is the cool part. God has equipped us for strong internal dialogue. He's given us what we need. Paul writes in 2 Timothy 1:7, "For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind." We just have to use it. We just have to use it. Okay, you want some examples?
Yes.
Okay, so here's some examples of sound self-talk. This is my favorite. Few things in this life are terrible, horrible, or awful. Most are just uncomfortable or inconvenient. Few things in this life are terrible, horrible, or awful. Most are just uncomfortable or inconvenient. If you can use that as your barometer for every situation that's creating stress for you, imagine how you can lower that stress level when you're able to say, gosh, this really isn't horrible. It's just uncomfortable. It's just uncomfortable. Ask yourself, am I making a catastrophe out of this? Your mom probably said, or you're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Well, time out. Men, let me speak to men right now. Okay? You cannot say these things to your spouse.
This is your self-talk.
This is self-talk, okay? This is not ammo. You stoic Marlboro men, John Wayne loving cultural men who are so tough that you can't say these things to other people. Even not just your spouse, other people. You can't say this to your kids, okay? All right, sorry.
No, he's right.
Yeah, I am. Small moments, but they happen.
But you can nudge them and remind them, hey, work on your self-talk today. Yeah. Ask yourself, what evidence do I have that this thing I fear is actually going to happen?
Yeah.
On what facts am I basing this fear?
Is it weird that sometimes I actually go to the worst case scenario and then I go, it's not the end of the world. We'll be okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's powerful self-talk.
There you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
I didn't even know it. I'm doing it right. Thank you.
Right. So
what's the worst can happen?
What's the worst that can happen?
I do that all the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And is there an alternative way that I can interpret this situation that will be less painful and more truthful?
Yeah, so how do we know when we need help? In other words, I find myself sometimes going, I think I'm struggling right now. I think I'm depressed. I think I'm anxious, whatever, all those things. And I've done a lot of, I'm not a clinical psychologist.
I'm not either.
Or psychiatrist, or what are you?
I'm a cognitive psychologist.
There you go, that either. See, I'm not even smart enough to remember what that is. So, but I'm not those things, but there are moments where I find myself going, man, think I'm like really struggling right now. And how do we know those moments?
So, the difference between struggling through a situation and it being pathological is it getting in the way of your day-to-day functioning?
Okay.
Are you struggling to eat? Are you struggling to sleep? Are you struggling to work? Are you struggling to love? And so when your fears and anxieties or depression is impacting your day-to-day life, then you know that you probably need some outside help.
So good. All right, so help people understand a little bit. You've created some ways for us as a church to respond to people. When you want to help people understand some of that?
Yeah, absolutely. Are we going to walk through the website?
We are.
Okay.
I think we're ready to go on the website.
So we have revamped the Pastoral Care Ministry. It's actually called the Pastoral Care and Counseling Ministry. And so we have some resources available for those easier to solve struggles,
Sure.
right? And then even those that aren't so easy to solve.
So we have a church, as a church, we've been working on a new website that we haven't gone completely live with yet. Can we toss that website on screen, please? Not just there we go. So this is what the new website looks like. It should be live by the first of the year, so we should have it live by the middle of this week. And within our new website, on the page that is within our ministries and then care ministry, we've got kind of a pastoral care and counseling setup. And so if you can, scroll down just a little bit, and we'll come back to this piece here. Can you scroll down? Nope, can't scroll. All right.
Okay, so
if you could scroll, what it would have some other ways, and we can explain. I'll let you explain. Sorry.
Okay, so one is that there's an easy way to submit prayer requests. So if you don't think that you need counseling, but you just have an issue that you really want prayer over, there's an online prayer request form that you can fill out, and then somebody on our care team will be praying for you. If you want to talk to a member of the pastoral staff about a problem that you think, hey, I just need some advice on this, right? I'm struggling with this marriage issue. I'm struggling with this parenting issue. Something that you just need to talk through. We have a way to have a pastoral care appointment. You can do it by phone. You can do it by email or text, or you can schedule an appointment online through our online scheduling system. But there are some issues that need more than one conversation.
Yeah.
And if that is your situation, then we have counseling available. And so I'm going to provide pastoral counseling. And you don't even have to call and talk to Cindy and say, hey, I need counseling. You can schedule it online. We've made it super easy to access the calendar. And so that's that. And then we also have Visitation. Oh, look, we're up. So when social distancing rules allow, we are able to provide hospital and nursing home visitations, but we can do it through video chat when we can't go in person. And then we want to make sure that if there's an emergency or crisis that is happening, that we have a member of our pastoral staff there to come alongside.
Yeah. So if you want to look at this website again real quick, there's even links for the care request form or schedule an appointment that Amy was talking about, where you can actually engage and just reach out and go, hey, and there's just times blocked off and available for our church. And so the nice thing about it is you don't have to go through a whole bunch of hoops. You don't even have to talk to a whole bunch of folks. You can just schedule an appointment, and whoever is available at that time, whether it's Amy or one of our other pastoral care people, they just will be there. They'll be there available to meet with you on phone but the ability to do video conferencing or video chats now, it's so much better.
I forgot one more.
Yeah.
We also are going to provide comprehensive mental health referral services as well. So there are some things that need a little bit more help than we can provide in the church. And this isn't a situation where we say, nope, sorry, we can't help you. You need to call this number. This is a situation where we'll talk through the issue with you and we'll stay with you throughout. Even we have vetted outside psychologists and counselors that might be better equipped to handle your situation, but we'll stay with you through that. We'll still walk alongside and check in with you and be a partner with you in that process.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm going to let Amy step down for a moment. Can we thank Amy for coming and sharing this stuff? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to close with just one final thought, and I'm going to set up a little video clip that I have ready for us to go. And our goal today was, this feels a little bit more informative than a typical message, right? Is that we're trying to help you understand what we are seeing, what we're concerned about, what we feel like the Lord has kind of been highlighting for us as a church for about 6 or 8 months, and how we're preparing for what's to come next. Hey, the Lord never wastes this stuff, and we just want you to know that we have people available, and that through Amy we've got some really good ideas working and some ways to help people connect, and that's our big thing. I'm just going to speak to you now as a pastor, as your pastor. Here's what I really want you to hear. It's hard. When you find yourself in places where things are spiraling and your brain gets stuck, it's hard. When you find yourself going, am I the only person who feels this way? It's hard. And I think our hope a little bit today is to normalize that some of what we've been going through, and I want to say I don't know there's a single person that I know that's not been unaffected by this past year. One of the things Amelia and I talked about last Sunday as we talked about joy and love was that in the midst of sorrow, there was joy. That we get a chance to continue to respond to God with gratitude, even in places where it's really hard. Ran across this really wonderful clip from a TV show called This Is Us, and I'm not necessarily advocating you should go watch this show. I have found it really helpful for me. But there's this TV clip, we're going to show you, and basically it's these parents had triplets. And of the triplets, one of them died at birth. And they ended up adopting a third child to be their triplet, to kind of replace that one. But they're still a year later, they're back meeting with the doctor, and they're struggling with, but we really know we lost something. There's still all this grief, that even as we're celebrating the birth of our 3 children, including our adopted child, that there's still loss. And there's this great moment in the doctor's office, and I'm just going to let you watch it. Here we go.
I think I told you last year, Jack, that my wife and I lost our first child.
Yeah.
Well, imagine me way back then, if you can, full of hope, full head of hair, expecting my first child. I used to sing to my wife's pregnant belly. Never had much of a voice, but that didn't stop me. My go-to was Blue Skies. You know that one? Blue skies smiling at me. Nothing but blue skies do I see. Bluebird singing a song. Nothing but blue skies from now on. I sing that song every day to my unborn child. And then we lost that child. For the first month after that, my wife and I would sit in our den and listen to that song on our scratchy old record player over and over and over again. And it made us so sad. It was like we were punishing ourselves. Yeah. But then one day, my wife got pregnant again. And to my great surprise, I found myself singing that very same song to that very same belly. And then 25 years later, I danced with my daughter to that song at her wedding. That song made us happy, it made us sad, made us happy again. The whole human experience just wrapped up in that one song. Hospitals kind of like that, you know. These bizarre buildings where people experience some of their greatest joys and some of the most awful tragedies. All under one roof. I think the trick is not trying to keep the joys and the tragedies apart.
The trick is not trying to keep the joy and tragedies apart. And I think it's a beautiful lesson here is that this thing of God's hope, that this is not these moments that we're struggling with, these moments that we're wrestling with, these places of difficulty. It's not the end all be all of what God's doing. And that is part of the human experience is that it is. They have moments like Jesus and David where they say, God, help me. Elijah's saying, just take me. And then still being used by the Lord because they're able to take it and incorporate it as all. That's our hope for you. So as we engage in worship, I just want to encourage you to find that place where you can go, okay, some of this is just part of the human experience. And if you need somebody to come alongside, the connectedness piece might be the most important. We need others to help us navigate this thing. So Jesus, come right now in a way that only you can through your Holy Spirit and meet each of us in all of those places where we're hurting. In all of those places where we've been struggling, and all those places where we're confused. You are God. Come and be our God right now. I just want to encourage you that you can take that very simply. It can be as simple as worshiping and opening up hands and releasing things to the Lord. It can be just an internal prayer of God, come help. It can be maybe there's a place for some thankfulness of thank you, God, for the things that you have done on my behalf. But let's engage with the Lord and worship as a response to his goodness, his love.